First, let me just say that, we have forward-looking statements. I have to be compliant, as does Mark, so we'll move forward from there. But there are forward-looking statements being made, and as we know, in hindsight, a lot of them have been wrong. So we'll just move forward. I do want to start. The title is clarification, a look at two key economies, and that's because I whiffed on the title last week and didn't connect the title to my presentation. So I just want to clarify that and come back to talk about the other issues that we're seeing, which is some of the struggles Germany is having and China are having. And when you think about the second and fourth largest economies or fifth largest economies struggling, it doesn't put a great signal out for the global economy going forward. It's also one of the reasons why I think the U.S. continues to attract a lot of capital and may be the most attractive market on a risk-reward basis, as we've said for some time. So I kind of whipped on this one, so give me a redo on this. But I'm fascinated by the advice that the politicians are getting, as if they really want to win the race or not, is a question that I keep asking. For former President Trump, he's been attacking the person, not the policies. And that is a huge mistake when the door is wide open to focus on cost of living, focus on the economy, and focus on border security, which are negatives for the Democratic Party right now and for the administration, which Harris is a part of. But he can't help himself. He has to go after the personal attacks and says it's his right. And even his allies are saying, stop doing this. The election's there to be won, and it's as if he's trying to lose it. He should be pulling a Reagan and just asking, you better off today than you were 4 years ago. I think the really fascinating thing is he had about a week and a half where he did exactly what he should do after the debate where Biden stumbled. And Trump didn't engage. He didn't say anything. He let the market dynamics play out. And now he's talking with Harris, and it's not helping him, in my view. On Vice President Harris's side, she started to put a stake in the ground on her policies, and we'll come back to that in a minute. I think this is the time that the halo starts to come off a little bit once you get past the DNC. The policies are going to start to really get dissected, and as they get dissected, that will be a pretty significant issue towards defining Harris. And as I've said for some time, this election is about who defines Harris, whether it's Trump or Vice President Harris that defines her. So far, she's done a better job than Trump. And I think part of that is his attacks that people have gotten used to, that have destroyed basically all the Republicans that tried to run against him in the past. And some other regimes like Hillary Clinton, when he won the last time, are falling flat on people today. And maybe it's just hearing the same message for too long, or maybe the country thinks it's time to move past that kind of politics. But his message isn't resonating as it had in the past. That's why Harris has come up. He has not dropped, but Harris has come up, and it's made it a much tougher race. I think we have a new race coming as their policies are being defined, except every time one of them comes out with a policy, the other one says, I'll do that. So first it was on tariffs, and Trump was big on tariffs, and Harris said, we'll do that. Now she's talking about housing benefits, and Trump saying, we'll do that too. They're really just taking a very populist approach on both sides. Harris's focus should be on the abortion issue and on the vision for the future. Trump is not strong in those areas right now. And I just think she's in a spot where she can either move forward very successfully or start to not define herself well enough. I think they both failed by not reinforcing they're reinforcing their existing bases, not going after the core. And I don't think either candidate's moved to the middle where the opportunity is and where the votes are necessary to swing the election. So that's why I think they're trying to lose it. I think the parties need to take a step back and really focus on how they want to define themselves going forward. Very hard for the Republican parties to do that because of President Trump. easier for Harris to do it because the Democrats were in a bit of a tailspin following Biden stepping down. And I think she's doing a better job of galvanizing the Democrats behind her, but whether that gets the middle or not is TBD. So I think we're going to end up with a very close election. I think there'll be a lot of back and forth between now and November. And I think you can expect a lot of volatility along the way. But unless they try and move beyond their bases and try and change their messages to be more positive and more forward-looking, I think they're both going to have a problem. And it will end up being a very close election. And the one thing I would say is I think the Democrats' odds of keeping some seats in the Senate are going up right now. But again, we have 78 days to the election, so long way to go. So switching gears to Europe and Germany, and I want to start with Europe first and then touch on Germany, but Europe profits margins are in decline and labor costs are a big reason. And this is at odds with the goal of lowering interest rates right now, and why the ECB and the Fed, I think, are a bit hesitant to be too quick to lower rates because they don't want to start and then have to undo that. But as you look at this chart, and this kind of applies to the US as well, I don't think profit gouging is really the issue. I think companies had increased expenses. They tried to get away with what they could, and then market forces come back and push prices down because not enough companies have price inelasticity. I think that's particularly true in the US in the grocery market, where you have margins of 8% or less, 3% even. So that's not where you can really play around with profits. You're in a fight every day. But I think Europe has a labor problem and a labor cost problem that is weighing on them. And this goes back to something I talked about, Mark, back in January or February, where we were worried about how fast the ECB was going to cut. I've not been in the camp that they'd be as aggressive as the market, nor would the Fed be. And it's because of the negotiated wages that happen in Europe. 40% of the employees covered by negotiated wages were just getting their increases in the Q4 and in the first part of this year. And those are now just coming into the figures. And if you recall, in the US, auto workers and airline workers were getting 20%, 18% increases. And then that might have been done at 4 or 5% a year for a couple of years. So they know that there's going to be higher inflation than the growth rates in those countries that are cooked in the books right now. I think that's a problem for Europe, but it's also part of the problem we're wrestling with in the rest of the world. Adding to that problem is the fact that Eurozone productivity has been 6 quarters negative. And if you go back to 20, it's not a great map. Or if you go back to even 18, it's not a great map for where productivity is. And the US has struggled with productivity since the pandemic too. But I think that that's where corporate capital is being spent right now. And I think we're going to see an increase in productivity. The question is, will Europe be able to pick up on that or not? And remember, GDP growth comes from productivity increases and population increases, and Europe's struggling in population increases as well. I just saw today that Sweden is, for the first 5 months of the year, I believe had more people migrating out of Sweden than immigrants coming in by about 5,700, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 5 months, and that's a pretty significant change. So are you losing what you want to keep, and are you getting what you might not want to have come in? Is one of the concerns, I think, that's creating a lot of problems for politicians there. So touching on Germany, this is the German GDP by, looking at it going back for each quarter. And as you go back 8 quarters, you see it's down half the time and flat one of them, or going back 9 quarters. Anemic growth below 2%, below 1% going back to Q3 of 2001. So these are not the kind of growth rates you need to get out of the hard times. And it's to the point now where it's impacting their ability to be part of playing a leading role in the world and in Europe. And that's reflected in the fact that one of the ministers for Germany was out today saying that they cannot continue to support the fight in Ukraine because they don't have the budgeted money for it. And I think that's partly Germany angling to access the Russian seized assets, which are questionable in province, as we know, and whether that's legal to do or not is a big question. So I don't think they're going to get where they want to get to there, but it just speaks to some of the challenges that Germany's finding, and the leadership role that they had under Angela Merkel seems very distant right now. This is the other part of the problem. While wages are going up, they're still below pre-pandemic levels against inflation. So people are falling further and further behind. Apologize for the typo there. Pandemic only has one A in the front. And all these problems are leading to confidence declining, and it's hard to turn around an economy when you have a drop in confidence at these levels. So the number of problems created for Germany to the point where they're in a bind. They're working with China now to figure out how to keep their auto business going and not see that decline. So they're on one hand going against the ECB and the EU in terms of trying to reduce their dependency on China. And at the same time, the economic problems of Germany, arguably the fifth largest economy in the world, is causing them to go against the EU in that area. So I think this is a sign of the challenges that Europe has and the European project has, but very specifically what their leading economy is facing going forward. So switching gears to China, China's problem is similar and different. I would say their problem really for the world is excess production that's getting exported at a level that is really turning off other countries. Why tariffs are becoming a much more popular conversation, not just for former President Trump and Vice President Harris, but also for the EU right now. And at the same time, the other part of the problem for China is their consumption is lagging. So they have a grossly imbalanced economy, which is forcing them to dump more goods on the rest of the world and creating more antagonism between China and the world and worsening the imbalance that they have domestically. And the steps that they've taken to try and deal with the domestic problems have not really played out because it requires a big bang, and I'm not sure they have a big enough cannon to deal with that. And the reason for that is that we've talked about the $7 trillion of debt that's in state and local governments that has to be dealt with in addition to what the federal debt, the government debt is. And their debt to GDP is moving up at a level that is growing at a faster rate than the US. So not great characteristics there. Worsening the problem of consumption is the fact that real estate's killing the consumers, as is their stock market, which has not done particularly well. Hard to have confidence and make big investments when your most valuable assets are in decline. And I would say stock market is a much lesser issue in China than it is in the US, but it is an issue for the people with money, and when they're also the ones who own a lot of the real estate. And real estate, as we talked about, has been as high as 25 or 30% of the economy. So when that much of your economy is struggling, then knock-on effects start to play through. And that's coming to the question is, where does China do? Do they pass the US and become the world's leading economy, or do they become more like Japan and go into a 30-year problem? I don't have the answer to that. I think China has a lot of positive things going for it. I think they're in one of those difficult down cycles where they have to get through a debt problem. But when you're looking at the problem that they're facing, you're seeing a net repayment of debt, which means that spending that would go to productive growth is now going to paying down debts, which hurts your growth rates. It will strengthen the balance sheets eventually and help do the healing. But we went through this in the US after '08. It pays off years out, not in the near term. So this is another one of the challenges that China's facing. And again, that's leading to a massive drop in consumer confidence. The question is, how long does it go? And what does this mean for President Xi? And how does he deal with this? And do you get social unrest starting to pick up? And we've talked in the past how China actually adjusted their youth labor calculation because it was too high. And it went from about 20% down to, I think, 13% and change. I just saw the latest number under the new calculation is up to 17% again. So they fixed that a year ago, I think is when they fixed the calculation. And now you've had a 4% increase. So in their reported numbers, so that's a reflection for China that I think things are not progressing the way they want. I think that leads to social instability, and that could lead to worse geopolitical issues. And adding to that problem, I don't know if you saw the problems in the Philippines yesterday, where China Coast Guard had 3 incidents with Philippine boats where 2 were rammed, 2 were hit and had damage in the hulls, and a 3rd one had a collision as well. I'm not sure who was the cause of it, so I don't want to blame China for it. The Philippines, the maps are tough there, but it's getting sloppy in the South China Sea. And when you have weakening economy and social issues at home, in the past, wars have been a solution for that, which is not a good solution, but it just highlights the challenges that China has right now in so many different ways. I would say, though, that for all China's problems, they do have a number of industries that are dominant players, which are part of that dominance is their global dominance. And if they keep dumping, that creates where the tariffs come in, whether it's solar or other areas. But they continue to make great strides in advanced technology. They continue to focus on their strategically vital industries. While Boeing is having their problems and Airbus has some of their problems, the aviation industry is a big part of the China growth plan. So they have identified the strategically vital industries. They'll continue to work through them. But I think when you see 2 of the largest economies in the world struggling the way these are, it's easy to see why the U.S. is a magnet for capital. And it's not because we're doing so great. It's because we're the best house in a bad neighborhood. So this is leading to, when you have confidence problems, you have outflows of China. So we've heard from the European Business Roundtable last summer. I talked about this, where 75% of the CEOs said they were looking to put their next investments outside of Europe. And now you're seeing the reversal of fortune from China, which was the big magnet for capital flows for the last 30 years. That's creating a lot of strains in the system, so much so that China and the U.S. are talking about currency swaps and other lines to deal with what may be a currency problem, which we touched on as the black swan potential, or gray swan, is if the carry trade blows up, there's worry about liquidity, and China and the U.S. are already talking about setting up swap lines to deal with a potential liquidity problem. I'm not sure it's just for what might fall out of currencies in Japan. It could be currencies in Asia, including China as well. So with all that said, I still think the market in the U.S. is going to end up higher at the end of the year than we are now. We've had 9 trading days after it was a scary couple days at the start of the month. We expect the volatility to continue. Powell's speaking on Friday at Jackson Hole. That'll set some people up for some concerns there. Is he doing 50? Is he doing 25? Is 50 too much? Is 25 not enough? How fast is he going to move? What's he going to say about future meetings? My suspicion, and it's only that, would be that he goes in September for 25, skips November, and goes again in December if needed. But he might not need the next one in December, because if some of the policies come through, depending on who gets elected, the central banks around the world could be looking at massive inflation coming back in from the post-election policies for the promises that politicians make here and around the world. And remember, 50% of the world's population is electing a new leader this year, or has leaders up for election this year. I think those struggles continue to drive capital to the U.S., which is great for U.S. companies. And it speaks to the fact that our industrial policies are good policies, but they might not have been good policies at the right time. And I say that they would have been better policies with any of the 4 previous administrations when we were at 0 interest rates to put that in, rather than to go big with trillions of dollars when we're starting to see rates increase. I think that's going to be a problem around the world. I think we have infrastructure needs that McKinsey said were unfunded infrastructure needs a couple of years ago were $75 trillion. I think those numbers only continue to rise because we're not spending enough to even maintain. So the less we maintain, the bigger the problem becomes. That said, there are real opportunities out there that we can be targeting, and I don't think they're necessarily just in the FANGs. I think you're seeing things go well beyond that. We continue to believe that in the U.S., market participants are underestimating the amount of spend that the government and federal, local, state, and local stimulus is putting into the system. And when you support that with corporate capital expenditures, I think they're in a much better shape. But we continue to believe that the areas of required spending are where you want to go in the U.S. or other countries. And that's going to be in defense, it's going to be in energy, it's going to be in infrastructure, and it's going to be in productivity. And we think those are the areas that are going to drive economies forward. So, Mark, I'll stop there, and I'd love to hear from people in Asia and Europe on their views of where things are going and how they get out of some of the challenges if I'm overstating them.
Thank you, Stephen. So questions, comments, thoughts? Adam?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Stephen. My question is for you, Stephen, and the Europeans that are on the call. What Germany's situation today, how much of that can be attributed to the higher cost of energy and the absence of cheap gas from Russia? That's my question.
I'll answer first and then let the Europeans answer, but I think that this has been a policy mistake in the making for some time, that everyone knew that their over-reliance was a problem. And all you have to do is look at the 70s and the over-reliance we all had on policies on the Middle East for our oil. And you just keep repeating those mistakes. So I think I think this is not a war issue. I think it's a years in the making issue that was then compounded by bad policy where they closed down the nuclear plants through ideology rather than have a practical plan to deal with the issues. And I also think their lack of an industrial policy to counter what China and the US introduced with the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act all work against them as well.
Yeah, maybe I can have some answers. So I think the energy problem has been more or less fixed. They find different sources of energy. The US gas, they build a lot of ship in the harbor cities to get US gas. They increase their wind parks and whatsoever. The biggest problem in Germany, I think, is in the politics, in the coalition. So there are three politician groups who are not, have the same goals. And this is a big problem. They freeze the budget, which now get in trouble to increase the defense budget, which is stupid at this moment. The bureaucracy is the biggest problem. So even old traditional German companies like Miele family office with 25,000 people are considering moving some of the operation out of Germany, go to Poland or other areas where they have much lower bureaucracy. Coming back to Stephen's, that they need working people, people in healthcare and everything. In the moment, we have about 1.5 million Ukrainians, highly educated, sitting in Germany in camps and are not allowed to work with high sophisticated nurses, engineers, and they need 12 to 18 months to get them a work permit because the bureaucracy is from the Socialist Party is so crazy. And this is why even big companies like Bayer, BASF, and whatever, BMW, Porsche is already investing here in the US. Volkswagen will build a new factory. BMW is moving here. The next generation of e-cars, they consider they develop it, but not manufacturing. And healthcare companies are thinking about to move out. So this is for when I talk to my group, to more, entrepreneurs, people who have enough money, if you not get a change in politics, we are ending up very badly. So we need to get the Social Democrats together, maybe with the Free Democrats in the party to stop this, what's going on there. That's a big problem. The companies itself are still, as you know, Germany is mostly driven by mid-sized companies owned by families. 80% of Chinese manufacturing is made in German machinery. And they are still exporting, but they are fear that the Chinese are copy everything. Germans have invented new solar power, they steal it. So they would like to move more stuff and work more with the US and with South America. They see it much better. But the situation is that the owners and founders, they don't think the politics is a big problem to grow in Germany. But even if the companies are growing, they have to find other places. We see it here in Florida and Orlando. There are a lot of German companies looking for manufacturing plants here, want to come over. And Florida make it very easy to bring companies over here. Space, my friend is the head of Airbus Industries. They will do a big operation here in the US and build Airbuses here in US and do their space operation into the Orlando Space Coast. You see other investments here, heavy. And it doesn't matter if Trump or the Democrats are coming. They are looking for states like Texas, Arizona, Florida, where they have an easy. They will never go to New York or to California. That's for sure. That's my opinion.
We do have some going upstate New York.
Sorry.
Yeah, upstate New York, yes, they like it, and but not.
The cost differential in that Germany has adjusted, you've got supply of energy, but does that cost differential of natural gas or LNG from the United States and Qatar and what we're getting before from Russia, does that cost differential, is there an impact there?
Yeah, it's still a little more expensive, but not to get after they cut the line, the North Line there. So they leveled it out and subsidize some of the energy. The big problem is for big companies like the chemical industry. Yeah. They have big problems with the steel industry. We read the news from ThyssenKrupp, and they all consider it's too much energy cost, and they have to subsidize it, which one part of the politics the government want, the other not. And what funny is the Green Party, which is a big part now of the government, they consider to be the anti against everything. And now they are more aggressive. They want to spend more weapons to the Ukraine, which we never. So the biggest problem is the Social Democrat, the Social Party there, on our chancellor. So he has the lowest level of support of if voting is tomorrow, he will not get even 10% or 15%. But he's hanging there and don't want to go. That's a problem.
Peter, isn't there a really interesting candidate? She might be from the Green Party that is kind of upending politics there right now. A woman taking the lead there. I was reading about she's using some policies that wouldn't necessarily be the Green Party's policies. It might have been a little bit more Merkel's policies to help say she's a realist about where she is in getting out of the problem. Have you followed that at all?
I mean, compared to the US, we have some good candidates in Germany. So I don't think Merz is the right guy, but he's also too old. So there's Pistorius, our defense minister. He's amazing, and he has the highest popular feedback from or support from the government. Then we have a young guy called Wüst, also Chris Democratic. He running the state of where Hanover is, Niedersachsen. So we have some very good young people who could step in. And I think even a coalition between this Chris Democrats, if the FDP, the liberals are not making it, then the Green and the Chris Democratic would work much better together with Habeck and Baerbock and all the other guys. With the Chris and the SPD. SPD is falling apart like the left guys. There's a new party now, which are Russian oriented, but it doesn't matter. People will wake up.
Wait. What did you just say? There's a party that's Russia oriented. Is that what you said?
Yeah. As you know, the left party, mostly from the eastern countries, they split. And Sarah Wagenknecht built her own party. She's very popular in the eastern state, and she will get a lot of voting. And she has done the Sarah Wagen, even she used her name, and she took all the voters from the left party. And now you have the two outside far left, which is Sarah Wagenknecht, and she is much more popular than the left party. But nobody do any coalition with her from the normal. And then you have the far right, the AfD, and so nobody wants to do coalition with them. If these two would work together, AfD right and left, they could have 25%, but this will not happen. So,
got it. All right, Andrew, question?
A quick add-on to what Dieter illustrated, and to add to his list of states, South Carolina has been welcoming the Germans for a long time with the likes of BMW and the upstate.
Yes, sorry, I
Mercedes.
forgot South Carolina. The Carolinas, I would mention, even Tennessee is good. So you mean, I mean, we call it the Southeast, include Texas.
Right.
Wait, what about Ohio? Why isn't
Ohio
Ohio?
is also high considered, yeah. There's some, and you know, beer, Kentucky. So
But other countries and multinationals here, Volvo's got a big outpost here. Mercedes-Benz, Boeing builds there. Assembles their 787s down here in Charleston. So there's been a lot going on in the Carolinas long before the last couple of years.
and you see the flight between the Carolina with Charles and German airports is growing like crazy. They like it a lot. I just had friends here who visited Carolina and say it's amazing there.
Well,
It's a
we
good-
have an event in North Carolina. We'll be doing the Research Triangle. It's the 30th of October, if you look at our events page. Do you have a question there too, or that was your add-on, Andrew? Andrew,
That was it.
before you know, we're gonna be in Florida playing pickleball.
The Toyota's got 225,000 miles on it, so it might be time to swap that out.
We got one more trip left. Other questions, comments? Thank you, Dieter. We were again, we'll talk about Europe in London for sure. There'll be a breakout on Europe. There's a lot of people coming from Poland. Speaking of Poland, Dieter referenced. And we'll be in Chicago the 17th, 18th, the 17th for our event. And then there's a Polish community event, the 18th, 19th, 20th. So it's on your radar screens. I should put that on the chat or on the screen. So Chicago, and that's the event on the 18th to the 20th. Oh, we're going to play golf in the morning of the 17th. That's a new thing with all the poles at a beautiful country club. So I like pickleball. I like ping pong, but we've done golf too.
At 9 or 18, Mark?
9 for me, 18 for others. I got to get back into get ready for everybody. I still want to do that ARS 361 best ball golf outing, maybe before it gets too cold.
We'll have to figure out where.
New Jersey, please. With
Okay.
Sean.
Talk to Sean.
Yeah, I'll talk to Sean. Any other, again, it doesn't have to be about China or Germany.
I would like to do a little announcement for New York.
Okay.
One of our families from Europe, originally Germany, but the distillery is in Holland, has invested in a gin company, and we bring a new gin to the US. Exclusive. Here's the first bottle.
You have to,
You can see the name.
yeah,
What's the
Gatsby.
name? Gatsby gin.
Bring it to the Hamptons next week.
And you see the bottle, it's a Chrysler building,
There you go.
designed in Spain. That will be fun. I'm
That
in
will-
New York sometime, and I help them to get
When?
into US.
When are you in
bring
New
it
York?
to the
When-
clubs.
When? We might be able to be helpful. When are you in New York?
I have to figure out. We will distill. We are working with a distillery in Florida, and they will bottle and distill the gin
Okay.
here in the moment. So, but it's New York, Gatsby. Headquarter will be in Soho in the
Yeah.
Spring Place.
I get it.
Thank you.
Just anybody who is in New York, and if you're a family office, we do have a New York event lunch tomorrow at Control Risks, which is a fascinating company that does not only 50 years they've done hostage, let's say physical security, and now they do digital security, forensics, intelligence. They're going to give us a dashboard that we can have for family offices and their portfolio companies. And I would say offense is a good defense. They give us intelligence you name an issue, they will have a guru on it. So that's another interesting new dimension to 361. Anyone in New York, it's Bryant Park area lunch tomorrow.
Is this at the address, Mark?
No, it's at their offices, and I'll tell you all about it. It's right there. It's like let me just, am I sharing my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if I got their address in here. I'll get it. I'll put it on, I'll share it in the group chat. Actually, it's right. Sorry. And Michael, you have a question. I know. It's right. Goodness. Tomorrow. Control risk. Right here. It's at 110 East 42nd.
110 East 42nd. Got it. What time?
12 o'clock lunch, 12:30 to 2 it's a workshop. They're trying to get our feedback on what's useful for family offices.
110 East 42nd. Got it. Thanks.
Yep. Michael, over to you.
All right. This one's for Stephen. You brought up the US election at the start of the presentation. I find it really amazing that neither Trump nor Harris is addressing the elephant in the room, which is the debt and the deficit.
They both have addressed it. They're adding to it, but to the tune of from anywhere from 1.7 trillion to 4 trillion, depending on the calculation over the next 10 years. But you meant solving it?
Yes.
No intent.
On that point, Stephen, sorry, Michael, just to your point, her increase of 21 to 28% of the corporate tax, what does that do? Is that quantified?
I don't have I heard the number of $500 million over 10 years, but I don't know I don't know that any of those numbers are right. Any of the numbers I've thrown out right now are not. So I would just.
Okay.
$500 billion or $500 billion?
$500 billion.
Okay. That sounds more likely. 10 years though. Okay. Sorry, Michael. Is that it? That was your question? That was your one and done?
Well, and you look at them, they're both, their policies are going to be hard to find how they address the deficit or the debt. Although I would say that the Trump tax decreases actually showed tax receipts go up after. Now we had a strong economy, so there's a little bit, you got to be careful with those numbers. But I think raising taxes on corporations is not going to hurt the big companies as much as it's going to hurt the small businesses that are going to really suffer from that. That 8%, 7% increase is material. It's also, I believe, 3% above the OECD average, which why you would put it above a level that would make you less competitive with your peers doesn't make good economic sense to me.
So the reason I'm concerned is given the debt and the deficits, I think that it's quite possible that the Fed will lose control of interest rates. That is, if they can't sell the debt, interest rates will go up, regardless of where they really want interest rates to go.
That's a very good fear to have. I think what you would see first is the Fed would reverse QT, which would help offset the supply-demand issue there. Because they're creating a supply and demand imbalance by not putting the bonds out into the market. So they're tightening up supply right now.
They can only do that so long.
Well, we don't know how long they can do it. That's the theory behind the monetary theory. I fear, as you do, that we better get our handle on debt and deficits sooner than they're ready to do it. I think for the U.S., though, the issue is as long as we can maintain our reserve currency status, we'll be okay. But we got to be careful not to lose that. And unfortunately, our debt and deficit problems are being mirrored by most other nations. Not the deficits one necessarily, but the debt problems are being mirrored by most other nations.
Oh, that makes me feel better.
That's why I'm saying it's the best house in a bear neighborhood, because you could argue that at some point with $300 trillion of debt on a, what, 30, on a $101 trillion economy, that if we don't get our house in order and rates go up again, then you could have a debt jubilee from the Bible where you just have to wipe out all the debt and start from scratch, which then blows up the system. So I think you're onto something, Michael, that people aren't talking about, but they won't talk about it until after November at the earliest.
Wait, November of which year?
Yes, not this one. Probably the next one is when they would start talking about it. Because that's when they're gearing up for the midterms to say that the current administration, whoever it is, let them down. But it's not on anyone's docket on Trump or Harris. In fact, every time someone comes up with a way to spend more money, the other guy says that sounds like a good idea. So it's really fascinating how they're handling it.
Any
I
other?
was going through one of the things that Harris was doing, Mark, excuse me, is on the 1.7 trillion, they're suggesting from one of the strategists we use that 1.1 trillion is to restore the child tax credit, which you could argue is a good thing. So I'm not against it. I'm just giving you the numbers. Another 100 billion is for the child tax credit for newborns. But there's one that they're looking to do, which was a surprise to me, which was they want to expand the earned income tax credit for childless adults. That would cost $150 billion, according to estimates from the Committee for a Responsible Budget.
They want to expand the benefits of not having a child?
Yes. Because they don't get some of the benefits for marriage or for child credits. So they were going to come up with this is what I mean. This is
Who's lobbying that?
all the people who don't have kids.
Yeah.
Right?
Welcome to California economics.
I believe they're called childless cat ladies.
No.
You, Scott, that's exactly what I was going to say.
We're talking about the economics of politics here, not the politics of politics, as Mark's rule is. So we try and avoid that. But everything they're doing, the $25,000 down payment, you could argue is not a bad policy for support for that. The problem is you got to build the 4 million homes first, because if you put that $25,000 credit for a down payment out before you build the homes, you're just going to create higher home prices.
Sorry,
That's
A couple quick.
Dieter's Germans are going to finance out the $4 million homes, so it's all right.
Alan?
Alan, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, living in San Francisco for 20 plus years, there are more dogs than children. And so that is where this is probably emanating from.
Well,
so I'm sure there'll be a therapy dog or therapy pet credit coming soon.
But you have a big problem in California. You have too many dogs. And that's like, and no one's like solving that issue. That's another thing. It's from another angle.
Mark, dogs make people happy.
No, but they're being put to death throughout Los Angeles right now in San Francisco because there's not enough rescues. So it's actually it's too many, unfortunately. Samir.
I live in California. I moved from the East Coast, as you know, and I'd like to say that yes, there are all these issues, but I'd also like to point out that there's a great deal of innovation happening here. So I'm hoping we can kind of talk about that stuff too, aside from dogs and cat ladies and all this other stuff, which is kind of on the margins. I feel.
Shift us to innovation. Go. Are you not going to? Was that just a comment? Are you gonna actually posit a vector for this shift?
Well, absolutely. So our company, as you know, we started a year ago. We're up to 47 million in revenues. Doing climate change, climate tech. So we look to engage with 361 firm, as you know, and the argument we have because my kids, my wife, everybody else.
Samir, Is he robotic for you guys?
Yep.
Yeah. Change.
You can go off video. Well, I get it. Wait, I know that you got your own company and your own dynamics, but look what I do love innovation. I think that's always ends up. I think that's part of what Stephen talks about is that innovation keeps saving us. But what about productivity lately?
I think the US is starting to see productivity improvement. I think we're gonna have a productivity boom here if we don't muck it up with overregulation. Not that we don't need proper regulation. So I don't want to be in the camp that people think I'm against regulation of all kinds. I started in the mutual fund business and I've worked in the securities business. So I've grown up in a regulated industry as we have for 40 years. But there's a balance to that. And I think if we are not careful, we'll cross the line and kill innovation if we don't get our touch right on that.
All right. Adam and Alan are back. Adam, go.
Yes, Stephen, how long do you see China being in this economic funk? And the other, Russia's been trying to export its gas to China, and China's just not biting. They're negotiating for a much lower price than what they were selling to the Europeans.
Yeah, they want the Far East back.
I don't think
that's another story, Mark. But how long will they be in this funk, do you think?
it could go on for a long time. They look at it differently than we do, right? I mean, for Xi, the issue is how long can they have the pain and he stay in power comfortably? And then can they work through the debt problems, or do they have to step up and try and stimulate the economy like the US did, which I don't think they can do as easily there. So because they need to find a way to get greater consumption going, and their real estate problems are the problem for that. I think their real estate problems will take them time to work through. I think on the Russia issue, Russia viewed themselves as partners, equal partners, and China doesn't.
Yeah.
So, so they're going to find out that Russia's got a real problem coming. As you know, Adam, their economy has done well through this period, but you can't sustain it. You can't sustain it.
I read an article. It wasn't exactly a middle of the road article, but it was Waltz and his China, let's say, background will lead a Nixon-like detente with China.
If I have to find a quote from him that they pulled out from, when he honeymooned in China and came back and was singing the praises of China, he was singing the praises of the socialist and communist system there in a way that would scare anyone who believes in a free market in the US. That way.
Wait, Alan, you left. What happened? Go ahead, Alan.
I was just a quick comment. You guys were talking about productivity. I was with an early stage investor yesterday, and we're seeing in the early stage, definitely seeing a bubble on the AI side. But the other area we're seeing a lot of investment is robotics, and I think companies are coming to the fact that it's a issue. I mean, Europe is a perfect example. The US, it's an immigration issue, and if you can't keep the immigrants coming and having that cheap labor, especially with the reshoring of supply chains, they're seeing a huge push towards robotics to make up that productivity gap. And you're seeing a lot of push even in northern Mexico. I mean, they're trying to figure out how they're going to meet this demand with the reshoring, and it's happening in many parts of the world. But I think that will be really one of the next area. I mean, you're already seeing that investment, but you'll see a lot more in that area, because it is really a pendulum between immigration and productivity from that standpoint. And there's a shortage of jobs globally. And I think many areas, the Sweden example you mentioned, the next net exit, the people are having issues with that immigration and the push that's coming from that, from a number of levels: quality of life, safety, security, economics, and the problems that come along with that. So
I think Alan, you bring up a great point on productivity, because everyone's waiting for the big bang from AI, when it'll more likely be a lot of little things that save companies a ton of money and take tasks and time away that frees up and requires you to have less staff overall. So I think it's not a big bang. I think you're dead on that it'll be things like robotics, exoskeletons, things that can improve workflow and quality. So I
Just
think
a-
I think you're onto it.
Sorry, just to comment on that again. Coming from California, what I found interesting about California is that we have lots of AI, lots of robotics, and lots of plain old agricultural labor, right? So when we look at the entire economy and when you look at productivity, there are many different kinds of productivity. It's not just AI and robotics. We're fully aware of what that is, and we're working on that side. But there's a lot of farm labor, right? A reason for immigration, so much push for immigration from lots of countries, South America or from Africa into Europe and so on, is climate change, right? Is the fact that it's getting unbearably hot in some of these locations, that crops are failing. This is creating a push for more people to come to these countries, and that's creating a lot of these political issues that we've talked about. Now, there's going to be a tension between that and the fact that on the low end of the labor pool, which is so you have all the agricultural labor, so fruit needs to be picked before it rots in the heat, and then you have skilled labor, like semi-skilled, like landscaping or construction. There's that type of labor. And then there's the high-end labor, which is manufacturing or let's say electric vehicles or whatever else it is, which is increasingly being roboticized. Okay, so my question to you guys is, when we're talking productivity, are we taking that blend? If you look at that weighted average of these different kinds of productivity, what are you seeing? I mean, clearly we're starting to see some. At the high end of AI with Meta and Facebook and everybody else, they're laying off engineers because now AI is doing that level of work. It started to take over that level of work. It hasn't yet impacted, say, the farming side yet. That's some stuff that we're working on, which is there's a project in New York that I'm working on where we can use hydrogen vehicles with autonomous robots to actually pick stuff in fields so that we can help to overcome, some of the climate change aspects. When you have a lot of heat, it means that productivity in the fields decreases because people just can't work. They die of heat death. So we're running into those issues. What are people seeing in terms of these different categories of labor productivity?
The way the government calculates is total labor force productivity, and they basically do what you said, what you just described, is they look at the whole workforce and look at the output and hours worked and come up with their productivity off of that. So it is capturing the other stuff. I think the problem with productivity is everyone's waiting for, as you said, the AI miracle, when it's not going to be that. It's going to be a lot of little things that I think is going to make the difference.
Andrew, you want the last thought question?
Just to add to the productivity topic, and I may have missed it, but are drones a big part of this? Maybe Alan would know this. Drone delivery and the like.
It's a component. I mean, but I think that to the prior speaker's point, there are many different touch points that handle this and enable this. I think drones are about logistics and other ways of, I'm working with a utility right now in Africa for, drones for grid maintenance and detection and it really speeds up on how quickly they can identify problems in electrical grids. PG&E and other people out here and are doing that as well. But again, it's a touch point of many areas. And just one other comment I would say about the AI side, we've yet to hit the trough of disillusionment with the Gartner hype cycle. There's going to be a point where all this money has gone in, and it happens every time in every cycle here in the Bay Area, where the money goes in, the revenues don't really fulfill themselves as quick as people want. And then we're going to have that disillusionment point to where we'll, finally see that adoption, eventually take place. But, I think we're going to see going from a general LLM model to more of a verticalized approach on that. And we will see that productivity then start really coming into these verticals, be it legal, be it medical, be it other areas where we can really get the data sets defined and improved upon, and people cornering those data sets to make those advances that are needed. And from a productivity standpoint, think about radiology, identifying cancers, things like that very quickly. You can understand the use cases and build those up. But I think there's going to be a while. It's that Gartner hype cycle, and we're going to have that trough of disillusionment, and then it'll eventually get that adoption. Anyway,
Alan,
I'm sorry to go beyond your question. But
I had a question to that point about AI productivity, right? So the current LLMs, they need huge amounts of data to train. and we don't have enough data, right? You have to make it up, because we're already through the entire internet. My question is, in terms of the development of AI going forward, if you look at how the human brain learns, right? The human brain does not need the entire internet's worth of data to do what it does. It can learn, a child can learn from 1, 2, or 3 examples. So are you seeing advances in AI where we can train AI on much smaller data sets as opposed to needing the whole internet to make it more intelligent?
I think it comes to the situation on how important that 0.1% is if you're right or wrong. And, from a driving situation, you can't really have that fault. And I think, and so you need larger data sets to take care of that 0.1, the 1% problem. And that's what becomes expensive. And it becomes the importance of what that 1% level is from a risk mitigation standpoint, or what is that value if that goes wrong. And so it's, I'll call it the insurance problem of ensuring that 1% failure rate. And if it can go by the wayside and it's not that big of a problem, then yes, a smaller data set, you can put it there because you fake it till you make it, until you fill up that point. And it's kind of a child. If a child gets it wrong and falls over, they're so small, and many times it's not a problem. But it's a risk reward type situation. And how big is that risk, and how expensive is that going to be? Anyway.
I'd add one other thing, that the layoffs from the tech sector, a lot of that came from just overhiring because they were in a competition for overhiring. Now that they're letting them go, a lot of those people are going to be absorbed into other industries and allow them to become more productive much faster. And I think that view that big tech's laying off all these people, how terrible is that, may be a bit of a misstatement of what actually occurred, that there was a rush to grab talent while everyone thought we were going to have 0 interest rates for a lot longer and everything was going to move. And now that they start getting laid off and going into other industries, I think that's where you can see the other industries start to pick up their productivity improvements because they have the talent to do it.